Hi everyone. Welcome to another episode of Trip 101's Travel Talk series. I'm Bianca, content executive at Trip 101. And this is a series where we talk to local tour guides from all over the world so we can get more insider information about their regions just to make traveling more enjoyable and easier for our viewers. So today we're talking to Tina, a tour guide from Berlin. She offers private and group tours. Hi, Tina. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, Bianca. Lovely to chat.
Yeah.
I'm Tina. I'm an Australian and I've been living in Berlin for nearly 7 years now. I came to the city for a nerdy history vacation in 2017 because I've been really fascinated by modern history ever since I was a teenager. And in my 10-day visit to Berlin, I fell completely in love with the city and decided to move here.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's great. Yeah, it's really interesting that you decided to go there of all the places in the world. So I guess we're gonna learn a lot about what there is to fall in love with in Berlin today.
Plenty. Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with getting to Berlin and getting around the city. So how far is the city center from the airport, and what's the best way to get to the city center from there?
So Berlin's really big, right? That's the first thing. So when we're asking how far, it totally depends on one part of the city, or
Mhm.
which part of the city you're staying in. And that applies as well to what's the fastest way to get to and from the airport. Depends on where you're staying. If you're staying right at one of the major train stations that has a direct connection to the airport, say you're staying at Friedrichstraße or Alexanderplatz or Hauptbahnhof, that's the main station, then without traffic, you're about 30 minutes with a car from the airport. You're also about 30 minutes with a train from the airport. And if
Mhm.
you get traffic, you could be 45, 50 minutes with a car from the airport. Meaning that if you're on a major train station with a direct connection, normally public transport's your best option to get to and from. You need an ABC ticket when
Mhm.
you travel to and from the airport on the public transport, which is important because normally if you're in the city doing your sightseeing or visiting the cool neighborhoods, you'll only need AB tickets. And it's
Mhm.
easy to not realize when you're going that bit further away to the airport that you need that C zone. If you're not staying at a major train station and the connection from public transport from the airport to your hotel is not so good, then it's normally faster to go by car. So
Mhm.
taxi or some of the rideshare apps like Miles, Uber, or Bolt. So, for example, where I am, I live on the edge of Neukölln. It's one of Berlin's quite hip, groovy neighborhoods.
Mhm.
And for me, it would only be 12 minutes with a car to the airport, but 45 minutes with the train. So,
Oh.
of course, I use vehicle, preferably when I go to the airport.
Mhm.
So, how you get to and from really depends on where your accommodation is. So, when you book, either ask the people in your hotel or in your Airbnb or yourself jump on one of the many mapping apps that we'll talk about, like Google Maps, Apple Maps, City Mapper, BVG, Yelby, Deutsche Bahn. There are so many options. Whatever app you use to map things, check from the airport to your hotel and then decide whether you're going to go by public transport or car.
Okay, so for public transport, is it mostly just the train that people use to get around Berlin, or are there other options?
So Berlin has amazing public transport. It was recently named one of the cities with the best mobility in the whole world. And so we have S train, U train, trams, and buses.
Mhm.
And when you have a ticket for the public transport, it's for all and any of it, which is really nice. So
Yeah.
even if you book your ticket on a bus, you can still use it to ride on the trams, the S and the U train. Even if you bought the ticket on the platform for the S train, you can still use it on U train, tram, bus. A ticket for the public transport is for all of the various modes, which is good. And what type you use will just depend on where in the city you are. So
Mhm.
some parts of the city don't even have any trams, whereas other parts of the city, trams are the most efficient way to get around. So going out to the airport, you'll mostly be talking about S train, regional train, or buses.
Okay, and how expensive are the public transportation passes usually?
So a single ABC ticket is around, and the prices change regularly. So I want to say that this
Mhm.
information is correct when we're speaking now, which is what, June 2024. A 24-hour pass for the public transport AB, so that's everything you do within the city itself, is about 10 euros.
Mhm.
And a 24-hour ticket for the ABC is, oof, I think that's up around 11 to 13 euros now. So it's just a couple, always a little bit more to have that C zone, which is what you need if you're going out of the city limits, like to the airport. And if
And
you buy a single ticket, then you're looking €3 to €4 per ticket.
okay, is there a website where people can check the prices just so they're up to date with it?
Absolutely. So the name of the major public transport apps and websites provided in Berlin is BVG.
Okay.
Give me a second and I can share my screen with you. So BVG,
Mhm.
they have apps for purchasing tickets. So you can actually buy tickets on their app if you don't want to buy physical tickets at a machine. And machines normally take card payments, but just if you'd rather have all of your apps on your phone, you can get the BVG app. And they also have a travel information app. Both of these are available also in English. And then you can check the beginning, destination, and it will also tell you exactly what kind of ticket you need for whatever you're purchasing, for whatever your journey is.
Okay, yeah, that's really great information. I'm sure all our viewers will find that really useful.
Great. And what was the next question?
Okay, yeah. So just in case travelers don't want to take public transportation and they want maybe to rent a car themselves, or do they have any options for that in Berlin as well?
Yeah, absolutely. You can rent cars at the airport or in the city itself. Uh, Berlin, in the city, it's really not a place you need a car.
Mhm.
Parking can actually be quite annoying.
Mhm.
Um, the public transport is amazing. It's very bikeable. It's very scooterable. It's not very walkable.
Ah,
It's just so big, right? Berlin is 9 times the square meters of Paris. And
okay.
even, for example, on my general city tour, when we do all of the major sites in Berlin city center, that's 3 hours of non-stop movement. Like we will cover about 4 kilometers. We won't come back to where we started. And that's really only 1/5 of one of the inner city districts. So driving is not super comfortable in Berlin necessarily. I mean, it's not bad, but it's not great
Mhm. Yeah.
compared to the other options. So we have apps like Miles, where you can just rent a car from, rather than actually renting it under your name for several days, you just rent it for one journey. And there are also apps like Uber and Bolt, plus taxis, where you get another driver to pick you up.
Okay, yeah. Also, for the rental cars, are there any international driving permits that tourists are required to have so they can rent a car?
No, luckily, you don't need an international driving license to rent a car in Berlin. Only if you're going to stay more than 6 months in Germany do you have to convert your license.
Okay, I see. So while travelers are coming into the city, are there any places that they should stop nearby? Or maybe if they want to take a day trip, are there any places that you recommend going?
So the city of Potsdam is not far from Berlin. It's only about 1 hour out of the city, and it's very beautiful. That was the city of the Prussian kings. That's where the royal family had their summer palaces built. And so for people who really enjoy that old European architecture, Potsdam is stunning. Lots of beautiful lakes, lots of lovely greenery. So Potsdam is a very, very nice day out. You can also reach that with that ABC public transport ticket. Of course, there are also the cities of Dresden and Leipzig. Dresden and Leipzig are both not very far away from Berlin.
Yeah, can you also take the train there?
You can, yeah. So you can either travel with the Deutsche Bahn. So Deutsche Bahn just means German rail. So that's the name of Germany's train provider. Here is their website. So DB stands for Deutsche Bahn or German Rail. You can, of course, get their website also in multiple languages. Some last minute tickets with the Deutsche Bahn can sometimes be expensive, especially if you're not willing to travel early in the morning or late at night. So, of course, another really good option for getting around in Europe on more of a budget is, of course, also Flixbus.
Yeah, but it's great that there's so many options for getting around.
Absolutely. The mobility is really very good.
So since we're talking about some of the places that would be great for travelers to visit while they're in the city or near the city, could you tell us about any dress codes that there might be to follow, maybe for religious sites or any monuments?
So mostly in Berlin, there's no required dress code. Of course, if you're going to visit a religious institution, then it's always when traveling a good idea to research the customs of the place that you're going and abide by that particular institution's preferences. But in general, on the streets of Berlin, etc., it's a very, very open city. almost anything goes in terms of clothing in Berlin.
Okay, that's great. So, do you have any recommendations for places that you think both tourists and locals will really enjoy?
Yeah, I absolutely do. This is a really fun question. So, some of my favorite places that locals as much as tourists really enjoy is a place named Hootsmarkt. So,
Mhm.
Hootsmarkt is this really beautiful riverfront. I mean, to say bar is inadequate, right? It's much more than a bar. Hootsmarkt is really a culture center. It's this beautiful, vibey, handmade furniture right on the river. It's a site of culture as much as a site of food and drink. Right? They have markets, they have really, really good food, they have a concert space, they have open air parties, they have furniture. We can sit right on the river and enjoy the sunset. This is absolutely one of everyone's favorite places in Berlin, regardless of whether you are a local or whether you are a guest in the city.
Yeah, it sounds like there's
So,
a lot to look forward to here.
yeah, Hootsmarkt is amazing.
Mhm.
Another one that I think everyone enjoys, whether locals or not, is RAW-Gelände. So we, of course, tend to call this raw for native English speakers, but RAW or RAW. This is a site of alternative culture. It used to be the Reichsbahnausbesserungswerk for East Germany, which is the train repair yard. That's where it got its name, RAW. And of course, this massive complex of huge warehouses after East Germany collapsed was just perfect as an art space. So
Mhm.
today it's host to a rock climbing gym, skate park, lots of so much street art. If you're into street art, it's one of the best places in the city to visit. There are nightclubs, concert venues, there's a gallery, there's a beer garden, there's a circus space. And unfortunately, this is going to be developed in the next few years. So anyone visiting Berlin should really, really go while they can, while it's still there.
Yeah, I suppose we have to hurry. Do you know when this is gonna be closed?
No, so it keeps changing, right? Because there's a battle to try and save something, and then the project's proposed, and then it's rejected, and then there's a change of government. So I honestly can't tell you. It feels like in the news every year we're being told it's the last year.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, hopefully your travelers will get to visit before it closes.
Another place that locals and tourists or visitors to the city love is this food market, Markthalle 9, which means the ninth market hall. So it's an indoor market hall in one of Berlin's coolest, grooviest neighborhoods called Kreuzberg. And in terms of trying local dishes, trying international dishes, just hanging out with friends, sensing the Berliner vibe, this is definitely one of the places in Berlin that locals and tourists love,
Mhm.
probably equally.
Yeah.
And then one of my personal favorites, Tempelhofer Feld, or the Tempelhof Field. So this actually used to be an airfield, right? That's why it's this huge patch of green space right in the middle of the city of Berlin. So Berlin has fought to keep Tempelhofer Feld as public space rather than have it developed. And now this place at sunset and good weather, it feels like a huge party. Berliners are out enjoying their lives, families are barbecuing, the vibe is amazing. If you're going to try and cross the entire thing, it's a good idea to rent a bicycle because it's just big. So if you won't rent a bicycle, be very happy to walk a lot and have strong feet. And actually, on the edge of the Tempelhofer Feld, there's even a former building which was a Nazi airport. So this was once the biggest building in the world. And what's possible in terms of accessing it changes all the time. But at the moment, it's possible to take guided tours inside. It's also possible to go up to visit the tower. And sometimes there are also cultural events happening. So right now, I know on Saturday night, there's going to be a flamenco performance.
Yeah, that
So
sounds
that's
like a
definitely
really
another
good
place
place.
that, yeah, that locals and tourists love Tempelhofer Feld.
Would you say these places are more hidden gems or are they quite popular and crowded?
The first three I mentioned are very popular. I'd say they're quite well discovered. The Hootsmarkt can be very crowded, and on Thursdays, the Markthalle 9. But one of the perks of the Tempelhofer Feld is that it's so big that there can be thousands of Berliners there rolling their roller skates and barbecuing with their families, and it still doesn't feel crowded.
That's great. Also, for these popular attractions, would you recommend that travelers book passes in advance, or is that something they don't have to worry about?
No, you can't do that with these things. These are not, these are more local. I mean, I struggle to call them hidden gems, but I guess they are. They're certainly not by any sense of the imagination on the normal Berliner tourist trail. So you don't need to, and for most of them, you can't even book in advance. The ones that we just discussed.
Okay. So what about for things like museums or maybe even restaurants? Do you need to book tables in advance or tickets in advance?
For a lot of the restaurants, yes, particularly if you want to go more upmarket, quite famous. But you will always find good food in Berlin. There is an incredible food scene, also a very good budget food scene. Often, particularly if you're willing to eat a little bit later, they'll say, you could wait or you can come back, etc. Regarding booking tickets to attractions or experiences, mostly you don't need to book in advance, like for the museums and sites. There are a couple of exceptions. One is to visit the dome atop Parliament, the Reichstag Dome. So this is one of the most incredible experiences that you can have in Berlin. It's absolutely free to do, but you must have an appointment. Now, those appointments online book out a long way in advance. So really, you need to book weeks in advance if you'd like to visit this incredible piece of architecture with this great view over Berlin's skyline and situated right on top of Parliament. If you can't get an appointment online, don't fret, right? A lot of my guests, they only find out that this is possible when they get to Berlin. They're really sad because online appointments are booked out. But it's often possible to get last minute appointments at the Pavilion, which is the little kind of beer garden souvenir store right in front of Parliament. They hold tickets there. So it's unusual in high season that you can get one today for tomorrow, but maybe only a 2 or 3 or 4 day wait time and you might be able to get a ticket. So ideally, if you're planning your trip to Berlin a while in advance, really do try and get a ticket to visit the dome atop Parliament, because that is incredible and that is something that does book out. Some of the city's most in-demand exhibitions also need to be booked in advance. So, for example, we right now in the Alte Nationalgalerie, or the Old National Gallery of the city, have an exhibition of works from Caspar David Friedrich, who's one of the most famous painters in German history. And tickets for that booked out good at least a month in advance. But normal exhibitions, normal museums, that's not the case.
Okay. And for the dome, how far back should people book for tickets?
It really depends. So there are seasons of tourism in Berlin. Things like Christmas, Easter, summer, these are all high seasons. And then pre-pandemic, it was often a 3-month wait list. Now it tends to be, I mean, really, it's hard to say post-pandemic. The industry is still retaking its shape. Some of my guests have said to me, oh, there was a 6-week wait list, and others have said to me there was only a 1-week wait list.
Okay, I see. Yeah. Also, you mentioned there's a high season, low season. So when would you say is the best time to visit Berlin?
Berlin's weather's tricky. Like decades ago, you used to be guaranteed Siberian winds under -10 degrees, snow on the ground for months of the year. It's not like that anymore. So it's really, really hard to anticipate the weather. For example, the Germans have an expression, April macht, was will. April does what he wants. And this year in April, it was so true. At the beginning of April, it was summery 24 degrees. Then in the middle of April, it was -3 degrees and it snowed. And at the end of April, it was 25 degrees again. So it can be quite hard to anticipate the weather. But really, high season, the busiest weeks of the year for us tend to be Easter, between Christmas and New Year. And then summer, kind of from June up until mid-August. September is also a very busy month. So a time like May is lovely weather. It's busy. It's maybe not too crazy busy. August can be uncomfortably hot, but then again, Berlin's weather is so unpredictable that also might be a mild August. So in general, for example, if you're coming for the Christmas markets, quite a good idea is to come more mid-December, because really from a couple of days before Christmas, there will be an explosion in the industry. It will be very, very hard to get guides. It will be very, very busy. But that really, if you were to come kind of mid-December, you'll be before the rush, but there's still all of the magic.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that sounds really good. Are there any seasons that you recommend not coming to Berlin or avoiding?
Yeah, so previously I, of course, would have said anything from mid-January to March, don't even think about it. It's bleak, it's dark, it's gray, it's cold. But with the changing climate, we had some weeks in February this year which were 15 degrees and lovely. And then that would have been a wonderful time to be in Berlin. But of course, in February, it could also be negative 15 degrees and sideways winds and hot, cold and horrible. So yeah, unfortunately, with the current weather situation, it's just very, very, very hard to anticipate. I would suggest that if you're not coming for major events, like right now we're hosting the Euros, the football. In September, at the end of the month, there's the Berlin Marathon. If you're not coming for events like this, avoid the city at those times. It's an electric atmosphere. It's exciting. It's wonderful. But prices for hotels are much more expensive. Crowding does become a real issue. And also a lot of the city will actually be sealed off. Areas like behind the Brandenburg Gate will actually not be accessible to traffic. That means buses can't drive there. That means sometimes tour groups can't access certain parts of the city. So definitely have a check before you book if there's some kind of really big event like that happening. And if you can avoid it, do, unless you're specifically coming for that reason.
Okay. And so are there any local events that you think travelers shouldn't miss or that they should go out of their way to see while they're in Berlin?
So Berlin is a city of everyone and everything. Whatever your thing is, Berlin has it. So if, for example, you were into techno or electronic music, then there are some events that you should absolutely experience in this city. Like, for example, if Rave the Planet or the Love Parade are happening, that will be a techno parade running through the streets of the city, tens of thousands of people raving to live DJs on moving trucks. That is truly incredible. If you're of the LGBTIQ plus community, then Berlin's Pride celebrations, for example, it's Christopher Street Day, is world renowned. Also, it's like a huge citywide kind of rave party demonstration all in one combined. And of course, if you are a marathon runner, then the Berlin Marathon is one of the biggest in the world, and that's probably already on your bucket list. Plus, of course, German Christmas markets, amazing.
Yeah, I bet like the families really love the Christmas events.
It's gorgeous. Oh, I
Okay.
also should have mentioned 1st of May. Berlin has long term been quite a left-wing city. So 1st of May is a very, very big event in the city. It's historically been electric and exciting and fun, but sometimes also actually unstable. There have been quite famous clashes between protesters and authorities on that date. It's becoming less of that nature and more of the nature of a big street party. But certainly anyone coming to Berlin on the 1st of May should just be expecting that this is a very, very big thing in the city. There could be a lot of mess. There will be a lot of excitement. Some places will be sealed off. And another thing to be very aware of, I think, is that it's changing. The legislation is a current question mark, but the firework culture on New Year's can, for some people, be confronting. It is quite dangerous.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's a good tip to look out for, I think, if they're coming during
Yeah.
that time. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely don't bring your dogs to Berlin for New Year's Eve. That is a terrible idea.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Something for a lot of people to watch out for. Okay. Also, are there any family-friendly attractions that you would recommend for travelers?
Yeah, so I'm going to suggest, to answer this question, a couple of my favorite blogs. So the Berliner is Berlin's English-speaking magazine. I absolutely adore their recommendations. I get lots of tips from this magazine. I've learned a lot about the city from reading it. And they, of course, have dozens of articles on Berlin with kids. Right. So I myself don't yet have children. My friends kids are now in the baby's age. They're not yet quite at that age, but I really rely on this blog. The other one that I really love using whenever guests ask about experiences with kids is this Instagram account from two Berlin tour guides, Lovely Berlin. So they are German speaking. Their accounts are only in German, but luckily when we're talking about Instagram recommendations, it works even if you don't speak the language. So here they've got an Instagram highlight story that says tips with mit kids, lovely kids. I think even if you don't speak German, you can figure out that's what we're talking about. And then you can click through all of their various recommendations for what to do with kids. And of course, you can save the names of things even if you don't speak German.
Okay, yeah, those are great resources for travelers to check out. Do you have any specific recommendations that maybe you've tried or one of your tour groups has tried?
So right now there is an amazing exhibition in the German Historical Museum, Deutsche Historisches Museum,
Mhm.
about connecting children with art and exhibits. It is brilliant, but it's not forever, right? So that's short term. So whenever there are really cool things like that that are a bit time limited, I always post them on my Instagram, Tina's
Mhm.
Tours Berlin, under my weekly tips. So every Thursday, I collate together the coolest events going on right now. That right now is wonderful for children. But like I said, it's also not long term. That's only a temporary exhibition. The other thing which is on right now, which is amazing, but again, not long term, is an exhibition called Radical Playgrounds, which is currently at one of Berlin's best contemporary art galleries, the Gropius Bau. And this is absolutely electric. This kind of really interactive, creative examination of what could playgrounds really look like, almost like a parkour adventure ground for adults and children. But again, that one's a temporary exhibition.
Mhm. Oh, so for temporary exhibitions, is there a timeline for how long they're present or how long people can go to them?
Correct, yeah, but that depends on the exhibition and the
Mhm.
institution. So they'll always advertise this exhibition will be here from this to this date.
Okay, yeah. So maybe our viewers can just hurry to see this one.
Sure. Or, of course, they can always check my Instagram, Tina's Tours Berlin, on the Thursday tips. And if there are any really cool things like that that I think look really good for families, I'll always post at least one family activity every Thursday.
Okay, yeah. Great thing for everyone to look forward to every week then. So are there also any activities or maybe attractions that are suitable for senior citizens?
One of the wonderful things about Berlin is that it's a very ageless city. So,
Mm.
for example, someone with a bit of gray hair might be more likely to get into one of the city's famous iconic techno clubs than someone in their early 20s. So there's absolutely no shortage of things for senior citizens to do in Berlin. I mean, the history of the city is spectacularly rich. The art scene is amazing. People of every age won't have problems finding things to do in Berlin.
Yeah, it sounds like it really has something to offer everyone. But what about more adventurous travelers or maybe those looking for a thrill? Are there any attractions that would be good for them to visit?
So recently opened in Berlin is actually the highest swing in Europe, I think they are advertising.
Mhm.
This is brand new. It really only opened in the last month. So for people who like a bit of an adventure or adrenaline, they just opened on top of a hotel in Alexanderplatz with a view over Berlin's skyline and of course the iconic TV tower. They just opened the highest swing in Europe. So
Okay.
I haven't been on it yet. I'm not sure if I will. I'm a tiny little bit scared of heights.
Mhm.
But I think if you're not scared of heights, the highest swing in Europe would be very, very cool. The other thing that we have for a bit more thrill sinking vibe in Berlin is the fastest elevator in Europe. So in the square called Potsdamer Platz, there's just a lot of modern architecture from the early 2000s. There is also the Keuhof building, which has the panorama punkt or spot on top of it. Wonderful view out over Berlin city center, hands down one of the best views over the city center. And they also have the fastest elevator in Europe that you can ride to get up to the top. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it counts as thrill seeking, but a lot
Mhm.
of people are really into cars. And so, of course, in Berlin, you could also rent and drive one of the former cars of socialist East Germany. These are called Trabis or Trabants, two-stroke engine, very smelly, kind of petrol fuel hybrid. If it breaks down, you're not allowed to be mad. It's part of the experience. So drive one of the cars of East Germany is one of people's favorite things to do in Berlin. And there is even a stretch limo version. So a company now named Trabi XXL or Trabant Extra Large has made limousines out of the cars of socialist East Germany, which is clever and ironic on dozens of levels. And those to experience a real crowd pleasers with visitors. And I'm not sure if, I mean, bike riding, we probably can't really call adventure or adrenaline, but the surrounds around Berlin are brilliant for bicycling. You can, for example, ride the whole route of the former Berlin Wall by bike.
Yeah, I think those seem pretty thrilling to me. I think the cars are very interesting and the unique attraction as well, right?
People love that, absolutely adore it.
Yeah. So I think Berlin really does have something for everyone, but I'm curious to know as well if they have a lot of options for any foodies that are watching.
Yeah, the food scene is amazing. I love to eat. I'm a big foodie, and you will not be disappointed in Berlin. The budget street food scene is amazing, all the way up to so many Michelin star restaurants and everything in between. So, if the things that you have to eat in Berlin, you have
Mhm.
to try the currywurst. That is Berlin's signature sausage. It was born in the wake of the Second World War, when, of course, there were British soldiers occupying the city, and there was also, a shortage of food, poor quality food in the wake of the war. And so the German Wurst, or sausage, is one of the most traditionally German things to eat. And
Mhm.
this was a hybrid, right? German sausage combined with the curry powder, which was brought in by British soldiers. And the other thing to eat, believe it or not, is döner, which of course is Turkish. And people always say, Tina, what do you mean I have to eat Turkish food in Berlin?
Mhm.
Berlin has the biggest Turkish population in the world outside of Istanbul. So Turkish food is very, very good in the city. There's lots of it in the city. And Berlin has kind of a slightly different take on the traditional Turkish doner kebab in bread, because it was designed so you could eat it very quickly on the run, and lots more sauces than they use in Turkey.
Mhm.
So those are things you have to try. Some of my favorite restaurants, when I really love sharing with people, because everyone says, where can I eat traditional German food? I love Knoblauchschaft.
Mhm.
So Knoddle is a very scary sounding German word for a German dumpling.
Mhm.
And Knoblauchschaft now has 2 restaurants in the city. Both are in very kind of hip, gorgeous neighborhoods. So from the city center, it'd be too far to walk, right? Be brave, use public transport, or order a taxi or a Bolt or an Uber, or get on a bicycle or a scooter and travel maximum 20 minutes
Mhm.
to one of these Knoblauchschaft restaurants. So they just do German dumplings, but in various versions, various flavors. And one of the reasons I love this is because it's equally satisfying whether you're a vegetarian or a meat eater, right?
Mhm.
I'm a vegetarian. The city is one of the vegetarian vegan havens of Europe. But of course, German food is traditionally quite meat heavy. And it's wonderful to be able to recommend a traditional German restaurant, super cozy and atmospheric, where it's just as good whether you do or don't eat meat. And of course, it's also really, really nice to have something that is a little bit different, right?
Mhm.
So it's not just schnitzel and sausages. And I mean, everyone wants that, but this is something totally traditionally German, but just a little bit different.
Mhm.
So to show you what a Knödel looks like, these balls, are
Oh,
Knödel, bread dumpling.
yeah. And what would you
Yeah,
say
and then,
the flavor is?
oh, my favorite flavor, that's hard. Maybe, ooh, they actually changed the flavors of the dumplings based on the season.
Okay.
And a while ago, they were doing a seasonal Salbei, or sage dumpling. And the sage dumpling with butter and parmesan was really good.
Yeah, do the flavors come back around as the year changes? Or it's just
I
one
think,
season and then it's gone?
no, I think I've often seen flavors come back based on the time of year. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Just in case you have a favorite and you want to come back for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, you mentioned that Berlin's very vegan, vegetarian friendly. Yeah, so a lot of
Yeah.
options for that then.
Yeah, that's really great. Frankly, it's not acceptable for a Berlin restaurant not to offer good vegan or vegetarian options. It's really quite abnormal if you go somewhere and that's not the case. It has some of the highest rates of veganism and vegetarianism in Europe. It's a very green city. And there are so many venues that are entirely vegan or vegetarian,
Mhm.
particularly in the Asian fusion scene, but also vegan junk food. Recently opened a fully vegan French brasserie with, cheeses and goulashes and even steak, entirely vegan. There are some amazing vegan burger places. So yeah, it's definitely not. So many guests say to me, "Oh, Tina, I'm in Berlin, but I'm a vegetarian. The German food's also meaty. What am I gonna do?" And I'm like, "Honey, welcome to heaven."
Yeah. So are there any maybe food markets or specific neighborhoods that are known for their food scene?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, you know what? Everywhere. Um, so I personally love to go eating in neighborhoods like Prenzlauer Berg, Kreuzberg, Neukölln, and Friedrichshain.
Mhm.
particularly this area around Boxhagener Platz. So if you type Boxhagener Platz into Google Maps, you'll find one of Berlin's absolute favorite squares. There is a food market there every Saturday. There's a flea market there every Sunday. And in good weather, the actual little grassy square itself, it just looks like a party. There are people everywhere.
Mhm.
And the area surrounding it has amazing food. It's much cheaper, more local, more vibey than you find in the city center, but it's very easily connected to the city center by the U-Bahn train station, the U5 line, which runs you straight into Alexanderplatz and the city center.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah, so as with a lot of big European, so big cities anywhere in the world, right in the tourist center is not a great place to eat.
Mhm.
So I always joke that the hardest question to answer as a tour guide is when you're standing at the Brandenburg Gate and someone says, "Where should we eat right now?" And of course, my answer is not here. As with a lot of city centers, the very center tends to be big business and tourism. And
Mhm.
so there's maybe not as much love, as much creativity in the food as possible. Commercial rents tend to be much higher, meaning that often only big chains can afford to be there. So my suggestion to people is when you're doing your sightseeing in the city center, try if you can to be organized that for lunch you're going to travel out to Boxhagener Platz or you're going to travel out to a different area,
Mhm.
or maybe be prepared to just have a lunch on the road. Like currywurst, the signature sausage, is great street food. If the difference between a really good and a really bad one is maybe not so huge, although a lot of Berliners would fight me for saying that.
Mhm.
Of course, if it ends up being overpriced because you're in a touristic area, it's not a big price difference if it's street food. So
Mhm.
if you're around the major sites, that's a really great place to get your currywurst. And then when you're really experimenting with the street food scene, get away from the city center.
Okay, yeah.
One more place I do want to mention, in case you're doing your sightseeing and you think, no, but we really want to eat a lunch right now. One more place that I want to mention that's actually in the city center, quite well located for sightseeing, is this. So zum Nussbaum means to the nut tree. It's very traditional for a German pub to have the name zum at the beginning. That's really common all across Germany. And this is technically the oldest pub in Berlin. I mean, actually, it's been reconstructed since World War II, like most of the city, but it has an old Berliner menu, fair prices, good quality. It's very vibey, it's very cozy. And in terms of the city center, it's really well located. Even if you're sightseeing, so most of your sightseeing happens over here in Berlin. And, this is Alexanderplatz, a major transport hub. This Sumnussbaum is really well located for someone who says, we really, really want a lunch in the city center and we don't want it to be a tourist trap. That's a very
Mhm.
good option.
Yeah, okay. I hope our travelers get to try it. It sounds like it has a lot of really great options.
Yeah, I've of course also on my Instagram regularly post restaurant recommendations, and for private guests, I'm also of course super happy to give them lots and lots of advice of where they're going to eat.
Okay, yeah. So you mentioned maybe having a meal on the road or a snack on the road. Would travelers be able to pick something up from convenience stores? Are those common in Berlin?
Yeah, the supermarkets are everywhere. If you type supermarket into your mapping app, you'll find plenty. Of course, the closer you are to the tourist sites, the further away they will be.
Mm.
And that's why it's really good in Berlin to have a public transport pass or have, access to bikes or scooters or whatever. The German bakeries are really, really good, and you'll never be too far away from a bakery. That's always a good idea if you're on a budget and you're in a hurry and you're in the city center.
Okay, are there any specific convenience store chains or yeah, names of stores that you recommend?
I personally quite like Rewe, Rewe, or Edeka. They're a little bit more chicer and upmarket, but
Mhm.
Aldi, Little, really, they're all completely fine.
Okay, yeah. And what about, let's say, food delivery apps? Are those common for people to use in Berlin?
Yeah, absolutely. We have Lieferando, Wolt, and Uber Eats in Berlin.
Okay, yeah. And a lot of options, I suppose, for them too.
Lots.
Okay. So do travelers frequently bring pets with them or maybe children? Are there any specific recommendations you have for restaurants that cater to those kinds of clientele?
So a lot of places in Berlin are pet friendly, but of course you always need to ask the question. And one of my friends who is a mom, she recommended two places for cafes with kids. Let me share my screen and show them to you. Family Play Cafe in the very cool neighborhood of Friedrichshain. So that's quite close to that RAV area that we talked about at the beginning. Smart Kids Family Play Cafe. And the other one that my friend recommended, who is a mom, was this one. And she said that at Lucy's, which by the way is very close to the city center, that's probably quite well located for most guests and where they're staying and where they're sightseeing. She actually said there's a little kids kitchen there in Lucy's the Deli.
Yeah, that seems cute. Okay. So we covered a lot of really great things for food as well. So maybe we can go to more traveler information, just information that they can have handy with them while they're there so they can, address any needs they may have. So are there any healthcare facilities that are available for tourists or foreigners?
Yeah, so I'm always a little bit hesitant to give people advice on something like medical, right? I'm a Berlin culture and history expert. If you want to know how the Nazis came to power, where you can still see socialist architecture, where the best vintage shopping is, or the coolest night atmosphere is, that's what Tina's Tours does. I'm always really hesitant to give this kind of information. But having said that, first of all, as a caveat, some things that I can say that might be useful is that if you're staying in a hotel, I always recommend that you first of all speak to the people in your hotel, right? They will know exactly what's around in the area available to their guests. They may even have a relationship with a doctor who will come in-house. The other thing is, of course, your travel insurance often has advice on how to access health in different countries, and your embassy. So, for example, I know that embassies, including the American embassy, also the Irish embassy, they actually have a list of English-speaking doctors in the city of Berlin.
Okay, yeah.
Right? So they also on their website have a caveat saying, we're not responsible, we're not liable, but nonetheless, they have a list of English-speaking doctors. Everything in Germany is closed on Sundays. So if you need to find a doctor on a Sunday, again, talk to your hotel. If you, for whatever reason, can't, there is 116, 117. Now, the phone call service, unfortunately, is only available in German. But here they have a website, which you can see translates to English, to find on-call and out-of-hours doctors. Unfortunately, the problem is when you use their Find On-Call Practices service, it always reverts to German. If you change it to English, it will jump it straight back. But I think you can make it work anyway, because, of course, you can use Google Maps. And you can find the postcode of your hotel and type it in here.
I see.
So on your booking information or on Google Maps, you can find the postcode. So this 10115 is the postcode of Lucy's the Deli. And you could then type it in this website and find out-of-hours doctors in your area.
Okay, yeah.
I myself have never had to do that, luckily, but 116, 117 is the relevant service. And if you need a pharmacy, the German word for pharmacy is an Apotheker. So you would put this word into Google Maps and you would, if it's a Sunday or it's late at night, you would choose open now. And cross fingers, Google Maps so far for me has always been accurate to show me which pharmacies are open on the Sundays. Because which pharmacy is open on a Sunday in Germany changes every week. Basically, the pharmacies in a district share the Sunday duties.
I see. Yeah.
And if for whatever reason Google Maps isn't working for you or doesn't seem accurate, you can also use the Apothekerkammer Berlin website. Again, I'm sorry, only in German. And you choose your area. So for example, when I put in Sunday's date and I put in the district of Mitte, that's the city center of Berlin, it's showing me which pharmacies will be open on Sunday. And in terms of if you need 24/7 and it's an emergency, you put hospital into Google Maps, the German word will answer, the English word will also work for you. And the word for the emergency section is Notaufnahme. So you put into Google Maps hospital, you go there and you go to the Notaufnahme. And of course, worst case scenario, if you really have an emergency, then if you call 112 in Germany, that's to call an ambulance or a fire brigade. And if you call 110, that's to call the police.
Yeah, that's a lot of really valuable information. Also, what about maybe simple painkillers or flu medicine? Are those available over the counter in pharmacies?
Yes, they are.
Mhm.
Many things in Germany, like in many countries, make prescriptions like antibiotics, etc. But painkillers and cold medication, allergy medication, you can get in pharmacies without prescriptions.
Okay, yeah. So maybe kind of a random question, but can you drink the tap water in Berlin? Is it safe?
Yeah, it's a great question. Always very important to check when you travel if you can drink the tap water, and you can in Germany. Very good, clean, safe tap water.
Okay, yeah, that's great to know. Okay, so another important thing that a lot of travelers want to know about is how they can stay connected. So when tourists come to Berlin, do you recommend that they get a local SIM card?
Yeah, if you like to have connectivity when you're out and about, particularly for transport and you're moving around, it's good to have in Berlin. Then a local SIM card is good. Although, of course, in the EU, it's mandatory roaming rights. So if
Mm-hmm.
you already got a SIM card from another EU country, you can use that in Germany. And in Germany, your SIM card has to be registered to your ID. So
Mm-hmm.
I recommend arrive, go straight to a supermarket like Edeka, Rewe, Lidl, Aldi, any of the big supermarkets sell SIM cards. Immediately activate it,
Mm-hmm.
because the thing is, you will have to do a phone call. You can do it in English now, and a person will actually video call with you. They'll see your passport or scan your passport in the call, and after that call approves your identity, it can take 24 hours to activate.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I suggest you do that as soon as you arrive in Germany. You have to give a German address, but it can be the address of your hotel or hostel.
Okay, is there an option for travelers to get the SIM card at the airport, or it's recommended to go to a supermarket?
I think you can also get SIM cards at the airport, but as in most places, it will probably be a little bit more expensive, but not only marginally.
Okay, yeah. So if they choose not to get a SIM card, or maybe they don't always have it on them, are there places with maybe public Wi-Fi or free Wi-Fi?
One of the best hot tips in Berlin is that all of the U-Bahn or underground train stations have a public free Wi-Fi. So whenever you see the classic blue U-Bahn symbol in Berlin, that means that you'll be able to find free Wi-Fi down on the platform. So lots of other public places in Berlin also have free Wi-Fi in certain restaurants, certain major city hotspots. But whenever you're traveling around and you see one of these U-Bahn train stations, if you go down onto the platform, you will
Mhm.
find that they have free public Wi-Fi. Not true of the S-Bahn trains. So you've got to go to a U-Bahn station, but all of those will have free public Wi-Fi.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know, just in case travelers have to Google Maps or something to find their route.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, so for transactions within Berlin, would you recommend using cash or is credit card better?
You definitely need to have cash in Berlin.
Mhm.
So Germany in general is quite a cash nation, particularly Berlin. They're very careful about data, privacy information, because they've lived through two recent dictatorships in
Mhm.
which information could literally be lethal. And so it's very much a cash city. Before the pandemic, pretty much nowhere took card. After the pandemic, it's quite common. Lots of places will take card. Just this year, I've also started to notice for the first time some card only venues, but it's still very common to find places that only take cash, particularly if you're hanging out in the cooler neighborhoods. Like that little list of neighborhoods that I gave you on a doc on my screen is very common there, that venues will only take cash. So definitely have some euros on you.
Okay, and where's the best place for travelers to get the best exchange rate?
So whenever I've needed to exchange cash, I've actually put into Google Maps currency exchange, and then I've called the different places and asked what rates they were offering. And interestingly, every time I've gone to a different place. So I
Mhm.
think that indicates that it depends on the time and the currency you're using. Typically, of course, when exchanging currency, you should always avoid doing it at the airport and hotels. That tends to be a worse rate. And it seems that in Berlin, exchange is very close to Checkpoint Charlie, are to be avoided. Checkpoint Charlie is a fascinating site of Cold War history, but it's so famous that unfortunately everything around it tends to be a bit overpriced, and I would avoid exchanging cash at that location.
Okay, yeah. That's a good insider tip as well. So once travelers have converted their cash and maybe they're on the way back home and they want to bring home souvenirs, what would you recommend that they buy? Something to represent Berlin.
So I've got a couple of suggestions.
Mhm.
One is something of Ampelmann. So Ampelmann was the East Germans, the socialist East German traffic light. Right, the traffic lights are really cute and cool and different in East Germany. And now, of course, anything socialism can dream up, capitalism can make money out of it. Now there's a whole Ampelmann or East German traffic light man souvenir store chain. So you find these shops in several locations around Berlin where you can buy odds and ends with the little East German traffic light man on them. So that's really quite a cute Berlin or East Germany a specific souvenir to bring home for people. Another option is if people drink alcohol, Berliner Luft. So that means Berliner Air. It's a peppermint flavored schnapps. It's a very, very beloved Berlin item. That's a good one to bring home. There are also souvenir stores in the city, and I like them because they actually sell regional, sustainable, and often locally made or designed products, which is really, really nice. We're not talking about mass-produced objects where you find the same thing with a different city name on it in every single souvenir store around the world. This is lots of really Berlin-specific, Berlin-made things. So a nice option is currywurst sauce. So, I said the city's signature sausage is currywurst. Here's a photo here. And you can actually buy currywurst sauce to bring home for people. So that's a really nice gift to give people from Berlin.
Okay.
One more thing I forgot to say about souvenirs is something with bears on it. So the bear is the symbol of Berlin, and you'll find it from chocolate stores to souvenir stores. You can find lots and lots of things with bears on them as gifts from Berlin.
Okay, yeah. And for all these things, would you say it's common for people to bargain in Berlin or to haggle for lower prices?
No, in stores, it's really not normal. There are in some places, like for example, around Checkpoint Charlie, some actual street sellers. And I think their haggling would be normal. But in a standard store in Berlin, that's not a common thing.
Okay, and what about tipping? Is that considered common or normal there?
It is. In hospitality, bars and restaurants, it's actually expected.
Mhm.
And it's rather curious in that it's not necessarily based on the quality of the service. So that's something it is good to be warned about, is that you can get very good service in Berlin, but it's not necessarily expected. So I come from Australia. Everyone's always really friendly and lovely. And I have to say, at first in Berlin, it was sometimes quite confronting. It's not unusual to go to a bar and someone says, was, meaning what? And at first it was quite challenging, and they expect to be tipped 10% anyway. It's normal, it's expected. So if you get good service, that's great. I'm very happy for you, but don't get upset or don't take it personally or don't let it ruin your experience if you don't, because it's quite Berlin to have this kind of rough, gritty edginess. And actually, I think you can frame it positively as seeing it as an authenticity, right? Berlin is a very authentic, and they won't put on this fake smiley thing if they don't feel like doing it. But you are expected to tip 10% regardless. Of course, if you get terrible service and you don't, that's fine, that's fair. But a 10% tip on hospitality is expected. And Berliners will often actually just round up. So if you buy a beer for €4 and it's €3.80, you give €4 or say keep it. You don't necessarily have to find more coins or change. Just rounding up is also a very common method of tipping. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Also, what about for travelers who prefer maybe more branded stores or more branded items? Are there any shopping malls or outlet malls that are available?
So I have to be honest, I'm not a good shopper. For reasons of sustainability and human rights, I've been trying to buy only secondhand objects for several years now. I take people a lot through the vintage shopping scene. But yeah, I'm not a very good person with giving advice on stores, I'm afraid, for that reason. But of course, in Berlin, we do have the most famous, I think we can say, department store on the continent. Since Brexit, it is actually the largest department store in Europe. It is called KaDeWe. So that stands for Kaufhaus des Westens. Kaufhaus des Westens. So that's in the former west of the city. It is quite beautiful architecture, heavily patched up since a plane ran into it in the Second World War. And this is where you have a lot of your chic stores, your most famous brands. And it's in Berlin's shopping mile, Kurfürstendamm or Tauentzienstraße. the streets emanating out of and away from KaDeWe are your top bet for shopping in Berlin. So if you are into shopping, you will have a very, very good time here. And if you're not into shopping, but you're kind of curious about KaDeWe, the sixth floor, die sechste, is the food floor. So that floor I like very, very much. So even if you're not a shopper, or if you know your loved one's going shopping and you don't want to shop, you can hang out on the sixth floor and eat all of the amazing food with a great view over the city.
Okay, yeah. Also, are there any other shopping spots or neighborhoods that you recommend? Maybe more for the vintage scene?
Absolutely. So remember I showed you Boxhagener Platz? That really lovely, groovy square, markets on the weekends, great budget food surrounding it. That is also a hotspot for vintage shopping. Also, lots of local boutiques, a place where you can buy lots of locally made or designed things. Another store that I personally adore getting all my birthday and Christmas presents from is called Let It Bleed. So Berlin has an iconic street art scene, and a lot of street artists are actually exhibitors and sellers in this art gallery come store in the district of Kreuzberg. So I always joke on my tours that this is one of my favorite places to lose my money. They have also some things that travel very well, right? Like smaller pieces, like postcards, like stickers. A lot of it's very Berlin vibe or Berlin relevant. They've got lots of things that, you know, also have famous Berlin landmarks in them, either really magnificently or creatively painted or somehow made a bit cheeky. Like one of my favorite artists who exhibits there, she takes famous Berlin landmarks and then photoshops them to have something funny in them. Like, for example, she did Berlin's cathedral in snow with polar bears running around out the front of it. So I really recommend always supporting a local artist rather than some kind of mass produced object when you're buying souvenirs, and Let It Bleed is one of the best places to do just that.
Okay, Let It Bleed is a store or is it more of a neighborhood or area?
It's a store. It's a store.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and if you wanted a neighborhood where you find lots of stores like that, then that would be Boxhagener Platz.
I see. Also, what about neighborhoods that are known for their nightlife? Are there a lot of those in Berlin?
Yeah, absolutely. So the nightclubs aren't to be found where you also have lots of bars and restaurants, right? The nightclubs will often be a couple of blocks away because they need large amounts of space. They make a lot of noise. So I always post on my Instagram every Thursday recommendations for where I would go raving. I use the website Resident Advisor quite heavily when guests ask me, where would you go clubbing this weekend? A Resident Advisor lists which electronic events will be on where, and you can listen to the music and choose your DJ based on that. Berlin's very famous for techno. People often just want to go to its most famous clubs. That's not always a very good idea because the queues can be very long. Tourists often get rejected. And also, you might not like the music. So there are so many different branches of electronic and techno for which Berlin is famous. That's why I suggest that you listen to music on Resident Advisor, and that's how you choose which club you go to, because you're more likely to have a better time if you like the music.
I
If
see.
we're talking more bars and restaurants where you can go wandering around, then that little list of neighborhoods which I shared with you for restaurants also applies very, very nicely for bar hopping. So this area around Boxhagener Platz has lots of really vibey bars and restaurants. If you were to go bar hopping in Neukölln, I would recommend Kaduka. It's one of my favorite bars in the city. Honey Lou is another. Jungle, spelt the German way. Is that Jungle, spelt the German way. Heiners. But basically, if you were to just go to the area around here, you know, like around Reuterplatz, Maybachhofer, then you will find such a wonderful place to spend your evening. Really good restaurants, really good street food, lots of really vibey bars.
Okay, and what about more family-friendly places or places that solo travelers or couples can also stay? Where would you recommend?
Yeah, I would say that any of those are also appropriate for those groups. Perhaps not so much all of Kreuzberg. So with families, I would probably avoid areas like Schlesisches Tor, Cottbusser Tor, Görlitzer Bahnhof. If I were with families or wanted a really quiet place, I would probably avoid staying around there. you see a major bar street, don't stay right on the street if you want to get a good night's sleep.
Okay, yeah. What about areas that have really beautiful views? Are there, or maybe hotels that have really beautiful views? Do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, so Berlin is mostly an incredibly flat city. It's not like the south of Germany where there are the Alps, the mountains. Berlin is pancake flat. We
Mm-hmm.
only have a couple of kind of hills within it. And that's why people particularly love hanging out in Berlin's Victoria Park, because it is one of the only parks where you've actually got a really good view of the city. It's one of the only kind of, well, we call it Berg, but it's not really a mountain. It's like a pimple. Berlin's so flat. It's the closest thing we have to a mountain. It's called Victoria Park, and that's actually got a bit of a peak on it.
Mm,
And so from the top of that waterfall, there's this lovely monument and a really wonderful view out over the city. So if you're looking for a park where you can actually get quite a good city view, Victoria Park is excellent. Hotels with views, Amano and Montbijou. So Montbijou Hotel and Amano Hotels all have some kind of rooftop offering. Yeah, and of course then there are places which I've already shown, like the swing on top of the hotel in Alexanderplatz, Berlin's TV tower itself, the Panorama Punkt, and famously, of course, the Monkey Bar next to the zoo, where you can get a nice high view out over the city.
okay, yeah. Also, just a little bit more about accommodations, but where would you say is the best place to stay or the best neighborhood to stay for those looking for more budget accommodations?
Of course, often you go a little bit on the outskirts. That's where you start to find budget. But then you have to look at whether you're really all that comfortable in the neighborhood or whether you're traveling that much further that it's not worth doing. Yeah, so basically the further out of the city you look, the more budget it becomes.
Okay, yeah. So we're winding down for our interview. I just have a last question, and that's, do you have any favorite places to stay in the city?
Yeah, so I myself, of course, have not stayed in the hotels of the city because I live
Mhm.
here. um, so it depends on what you want when you come to Berlin. Berlin has absolutely everything for everyone. If you're coming for the history and you're going to spend the whole time in museums and sites, then you probably want to be in the historical center. You therefore, however, have to be prepared that you're not close to good food unless you're going to pay in the really fine dining market, right? You're going to go to the Michelins, etc. So in that case, you might stay somewhere near Gendarmenmarkt, somewhere near Checkpoint Charlie. Checkpoint Charlie has no vibe. I personally would avoid staying anywhere near that, although you're really well connected. You're right in the middle. And if you stay like somewhere like the Brandenburg Gate, again, great connectedness for your sites and your museums, but yeah, no Berliner vibe, right? And not a great place to stay for food unless you're in a really upmarket budget. I personally would try and stay in one of the groovy neighborhoods, so the ones that I had on that little shared list,
Mhm.
but with a very good public transport connection to the city center. That's partly why I really like anything on the U5 train line, because the U5 train line zooms you super quickly to Alexanderplatz, Museum Island, Unter den Linden, which is a stop very close to Checkpoint Charlie and a lot of museums, and the Brandenburg Gate and Parliament. So
Mhm.
if you, for example, stay in Friedrichshain, the area around Boxhagener Platz, then you're in a groovy, vibey local neighborhood, beautiful pre-war housing, great food scene. But in 20 minutes on one train only, you're right in the city center at all of the sites. I
Okay.
personally don't recommend staying in the West unless you're a shopper, right?
Mhm.
That area around Cardiff, for me personally, doesn't feel, it feels like every big city in the world has its chicky shopping mile with the major brands. For
Mhm.
me, that's not necessarily, there's nothing really distinctively Berlin about that for me personally. So I don't really like staying there unless you need to be close to the zoo or the department store. Yeah, and then if you do really want to stay in Mitte, meaning Mitte is the name of the city center district. The Germans are super literal when they name things. They call their city center Mitte. Oh, excuse me, I realize how hard it is to use my Berlin map because look at all my dots. I'm obsessed with experimenting and exploring and mapping Berlin. These are all my crazy dots. I
Mhm.
share lists like this with my private guests, hence all the dots. So this area, right, a little bit north of Mitte, quite close to Prenzlauer Berg, even Prenzlauer Berg itself, if you're well connected, like on a tram line to the city center, is very nice. If you're going to stay around Mitte, I recommend it being this area because it's vibey, got some lovely old architecture. You've got some good places to eat and drink, great gallery scene, but you're not that far away from your sightseeing, which is in here. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Typically in here, there's no real sense of kind of Berliner life. You know, it's sightseeing, it's tourism, it's big business. You don't really get the Berliner vibe, although you're right at all the things you want to see. So I would say if you do want to stay in Mitte, you're better off out in this kind of part of it.
Okay, yeah. Also, since Berlin has so much to offer, how long would you recommend that tourists stay within the city just so they get the full experience?
So how long to stay in Berlin? Well, I've been in Berlin 7 years and I'm still not done. So I always say that to see what you have to see in Berlin, you
Mm-hmm.
need to do a general city tour, right? The sites, for example, from Museum Island running to Brandenburg Gate, Checkpoint Charlie on the way, Memorial to the Murdered Jews of Europe. That, if you're a fast walker, is doable in a 3 hour city tour.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then once you've done all those major sites, you definitely have to see the East Side Gallery, the most famous painted section of Berlin Wall. And really, you could do all of that in a day.
Mm-hmm.
Then I actually think you have to see one of the cool neighborhoods. If you only do those two things, you haven't seen any Berliner vibe. So then you have to go out to one of the neighborhoods that Tina recommended to you, go out to one of those restaurants, wander around, see what the old houses looked like before the city was bombed and redesigned. If you've done those three things, you've kind of done everything you have to. And then
Mm-hmm.
you just get to do what you want. Right. So there's an endless program in Berlin. We have over 170 museums. We have dozens of galleries. We have nonstop art events. Every single Thursday, when I organize my Tina's tips for event recommendations, there are hundreds of things. I have to try and whittle it down to a manageable number. The program on offer in the city is huge.
Mm-hmm.
So don't have under 2 days. I mean, you of course can do the must sees in one day, but if you spend a whole week in Berlin, there is no way you will be bored, right? You will still have dozens of things on your list that you're itching to do. Yeah, so you can actually cover everything you have to do in just one day, but you really need at least two if you want to get vibe. And really, Berlin is easily a city you can spend a week in and think, I could do some more.
Okay, yeah. And maybe just to wrap up, what do you think are the essential things that a traveler should bring when they visit the city?
Check the weather. Like
Mm-hmm.
I said, Berlin's weather is constantly changing, and be prepared, right? It might rain, it might be windy, it might be cold, it might be wet, it might be brutally hot. So check the weather and be prepared, right? People often arrive for tours with me and it's 28 degrees and sunny and they don't have a hat or sunscreen or water. And in some of the city sites, I can't get them shade. They're not prepared. Also they often show up for a tour when the forecast is that bucketing rain will start 3 hours in and they don't have an umbrella or a rain jacket. So the first thing we have to do is waste our shared time to go and get them those things. So check the weather, be prepared. And of course, bring cash. You need cash in Berlin.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much, Tina. You've shared so much useful information. I'm sure our travelers are really grateful for all the insider knowledge that you've provided.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, there's one more really useful app that I
Okay.
wanted to recommend. I wanted to recommend it in the transit section, and then I was a bit nervous in front of the camera.
Yeah, no
Um,
worries.
so this is the app that I recommend getting if you're coming to Berlin, unless you say, no, we're only going to ride Ubers or taxis everywhere. That's fine. If you're only staying one day and right in the center, then maybe you don't need it. But even if you're here for a couple of days, Berlin is so big. The better you are at moving around the city, the more you'll
Mhm.
enjoy it. This app, Yelby, is very convenient because it's all of the public transport and sharing services on one app. So here you can get all the various public transport, plus you can get the scooters, you can get mopeds, you can get bicycles, you can even get a car or a taxi through this. So I find Yelby really, really convenient when you're visiting Berlin.
Okay, yeah. Very helpful, I think. It covers everything.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great app. It's quite new and it's very, very handy.
Okay, and it's a free app as well.
Yeah, getting the app is free. And then, of course, you pay for the various subscriptions involved within it. So if you
Mhm.
choose public transport, you, of course, have to pay for the public transport ticket.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Any other things you want to mention?
Oh, yeah. One more thing in our little notes, scams. So
Mhm.
Berlin, mostly, I feel very safe. I'm a young woman. I walk around at night. I come home from a restaurant or a theater with my friends or alone at 3 in the morning. I feel fine.
Mhm.
There are only two scams that we regularly see in the city center. One is fake petition signers. So people walking around asking you to sign a petition for the needy. It's just begging, right? They'll ask you to sign a petition and then ask for money. So just be aware if you see people asking you to sign that, that's probably what that is. And the other one, which unfortunately parts a lot of people with their money, is at Checkpoint Charlie. It's a cup game.
Uh-huh.
So these people with the cup game, they're serious. They want 50 euros a try. They have actors who hang out there and play, and it looks like they're winning. And so they are really, really terrible for scamming guests to the city. They're very successful. One of them told me once they make 1,000 euros a day. So a lot of
Mhm.
people are falling for this scam. It's not fun to be scammed on vacation. Do not play the street games at Checkpoint Charlie. They're not games, they're scams.
Okay, yeah. So despite this, would you still say that the city is pretty safe for solo travelers or female travelers?
Yeah, I feel very safe. I'm always hesitant to give advice on safety because anything can go wrong anytime, anywhere. But I, as a young woman, have always felt safe being in Berlin alone, including in the middle of the night.
Okay, yeah. That's really great to know. I'm sure you've alleviated a lot of the fears of other travelers.
Yeah. And of course, if people want to ask me specific things, they're welcome to write me. Right. And my Instagram, Tina's Tours Berlin, has lots and lots of recommendations for the city.
Yeah, I'm sure travelers will definitely check that out.
Great.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.